Hello, I'm Deborah Kaufman. I'm filling in for Michelle Hummel today with the Herkimer County Chamber of Commerce. I have Mark Walczyk here with me, our new senator, and I'm excited to have a little chat with him and get some ideas of where things are going in the future and what we can do in Herkimer County, what exciting things are on the plate for us. So, Mark, can you give us a little bit of your background? Tell us what you've been up to.
Thanks for filling in. We miss Michelle and hope that she feels better. Saw her this morning, and it's an honor to be here. What a cool studio, and excited about having a conversation about whatever direction it goes today.
Yeah, it was one of those last-minute fill-in things, and so Michelle got ill, and Deborah said, "Oh, heck, I'm here." Oh, darn.
Oh, darn. I'm not in jeans.
Yeah, I know.
Can fill in. But anyway, tell me a little bit about your experience and what you've been doing.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the state senator that represents the newly drawn 49th Senate District that I call the jewel of the New York State Senate. So out of 63 Senate districts, this is the one where you can find garnet and diamonds and quartz and a bunch of other jewels, along with the glistening emerald waters of the St. Lawrence River. It's a seven county Senate district. It's the largest Senate district in the state of New York geographically.
Wow.
So it's half of St. Lawrence County, all of Jefferson County, half of Oswego County, all of Lewis County, almost all of Herkimer County. A couple of towns in the south I still share with Senator Joe Griffo, who's a good friend of mine. And then I've got Hamilton and Fulton counties to the east of us. So a huge territory to cover.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So how has your life changed from assemblyman to now working with this entire geographic area that is the size of a state almost?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I think larger than like 7 states in the union. So I have a bigger district than a lot of governors do, but that's the time on the road. That's the job that I signed up for. I left Watertown, kissed my wife and my 1.5-year-old as he was sleeping this morning before I left Watertown to be at the Economic Development Forum. And but that's part of the job. That's what I signed up for. The difference geographically, I have more area to cover. You represent more people. So I had 2 terms in the state assembly. Back in 2018, I ran against a 10-year incumbent who was a Democrat and beat that 10-year incumbent to take the seat that covered northern Jefferson and St. Lawrence counties, an area I refer to as the front yard of America because it's got 4 border crossings with Canada. It's literally the first impression that Canadians get when they come to our country. And we have a lot of pride in calling it the front yard of America. And so Senator Ritchie, who represented St. Lawrence, Oswego, and Jefferson counties in the Senate, announced her retirement. So I announced, I know that area very well. I was formerly a staffer for State Senator Patty Ritchie. So I said, well, shoot, I learned something in the New York State Assembly. I already know the ropes in this Senate district. That's a no-brainer. I would love to do that job. And while I was running for that position, they changed the districts a couple of times. I don't know if you remember the redistricting saga from
it was a saga
last spring into summer. But at one point I was running after I had announced and qualified on a petition. Then they changed the lines. I was running in the Finger Lakes at one point.
Oh my gosh!
And then had Herkimer County actually in that district. Actually, Herkimer County I lost in the middle and then gained you back in the final district. So it had been redrawn into the new district that I was running for, was eliminated in redistricting in the middle, and then came back to me in the end and picked up Hamilton and Fulton counties as well. So
it grew.
It grew to be the largest Senate. And, and we're rural up here. The district covers half of the Adirondacks. I split it with my neighbor next door, Senator Dan Steck, and pretty cool opportunity to represent half of the Adirondacks and a lot of communities, Little Falls included, and a lot of these little communities along the Thruway or dotted along old, logging and paper corridors, or, in the textile industry or the leather industry,
Yeah.
we're going great in upstate New York. A lot of that proud industrial history across this district. There's a lot of things that tie it together.
Yeah. Well, in Herkimer County, too, I mean, we have some of the most beautiful countryside and a lot of water. And the people are hardworking. They're the type of people that will do anything for you and very welcoming. So, I know this area is particularly thankful for someone like yourself to be representing us. So my big question is, what about Herkimer County? What are your plans overall? Anything on the plate that you think would be interesting to the chamber businesses and others in Herkimer County?
Well, as far as plans go, we're in the minority. So just to get the political numbers out of the way right up front, there's 63 senators in the state of New York. 21 of them are Republicans. So the Democrats have a supermajority. That is largely based on the population. New York City has a large population center, and right now they're largely run by Democrats. That wasn't always the case. We used to have some Republican seats in New York City, some great balance on Long Island and the Hudson Valley. The Republicans actually controlled the state Senate for a long time over New York's history, and I'm hopeful that can come back. But right now, it's our job to sort of be the voice of opposition on most things, to call criticism where it's due. But I'm also a big believer that after the election, after the competition in a campaign is done, that we all get together and we should all be governing for the good of all New Yorkers.
Yeah.
So if there's mutual respect between the parties and between the representatives that are all elected to do a job in Albany, then representative democracy works really well if we're working together for the good of all.
Yeah. And I know, from what most people in Herkimer County and things I've heard, they're always talking about, we need a bigger voice in Albany. We need for them to pay attention to us because they do pay attention to downstate quite a bit. And because we're rural and very spread out, it's always a challenge to get the attention. And so looking at the state of the economy, looking at, what most people are doing in Herkimer County, what are your thoughts as far as going forward? Anything that would be helpful to businesses, farms, anything in the area that you can share with us?
Well, there's a lot of great and exciting things going on in Herkimer County right now. You've got a super active IDA that is really running out of land. They're developing so quickly and have really clued developers into, hey, Herkimer County is a really good place to put a business, to put some jobs. We've got the infrastructure here that can accept you, and this is a great corridor to do business on. So it's nice to see some spark in upstate New York, and see communities come together. It's not just one person and it's not just one agency. We know this means across the board communities are supporting this thing. All the governmental and non-governmental bodies that are involved are getting together to make projects happen in this county, and it's exciting to see.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of momentum all of a sudden, and it's good. And we need the jobs in Herkimer County and most of upstate, I would imagine. So when you look at your role, and I know you're coming in, you're relatively new to the team, the Senate team, but do you anticipate any challenges, or is this a year of building relationships and finding out who's doing what, or what are your plans for this year?
Thanks for the cup of coffee, by the way.
You're welcome.
You needed that, right?
A little caffeine.
Well, I left pretty early this morning. It was dark out for my whole drive, and no, I really appreciate it. It's delicious coffee too.
Oh, thanks. And with a little baby at home too. I mean, that's. Did you get sleep last night?
He's the best. My little boy, he is getting into so much trouble, but it's fun.
Yeah.
We're having a really
Yeah.
good time. He didn't sleep for the first year of life, pretty much. He didn't sleep through the night.
Nor did you.
He wasn't. Yeah, neither did we. He wasn't one of those like miracle babies that I'm jealous of other new parents about.
Yeah.
But we love him now, and he's sleeping through the night. And I don't mind if he terrorizes the dog throughout the day.
Yeah.
He's a blast.
That's great.
I forgot your question.
Well, it was more about you went from the the state assembly, moving up to the senator kind of thing, and so I wanted to know what that transition was like. She'd asked that earlier, like what's the difference between the two bodies, and then another question on top of that is kind of they have a supermajority. Where do you have to get to where that is not the case? To where you don't have to necessarily control the Senate, but you can at least slow the supermajority down. Sure. Is that possible? And how many seats would you have to have? And are there any thoughts about how to make that happen?
Yeah, wild. There's so much to unpack here. I could
I
talk
know.
for the next
I'm
45
sorry.
minutes off of those.
Hey, well, she wanted it to be half an hour to 45 minutes, so I gave you a long running question.
All right, I'm gonna hit the last one first because it's
Okay.
a really interesting story in politics. There was this seat in Syracuse that the Republican who was running lost it by 10 votes. So if anybody hearing the sound of my voice thinks that their vote doesn't matter in the state of New York.
Oh, we know
It
that.
does.
We've seen that here in Herkimer County.
Those
Yes.
10 votes were the difference between them having a supermajority in the state Senate and them not. That seat was the difference maker.
Oh my God!
Or
So
any,
one
or
more,
any other seat.
but one more seat. Those 10 votes.
One more seat for the Republicans would have broken the supermajority. Now, what does a supermajority mean? It means constitutionally, and because they have a supermajority in both houses, if the governor were to veto a piece of legislation, the legislature could technically override the governor's veto by passing that same bill again, and it automatically becomes law.
Okay.
This puts even a governor like Kathy Hochul at a disadvantage when negotiating with the Senate and the Assembly, who right now, I mean, frankly, they've got some members who are pretty far out there that are kind of the tail that are wagging the dog politically right now in New York City, and that's why you see some of this policy that makes absolutely no sense. They don't make responsible policy out of their majorities right now, and especially on some bad days in Albany. And it's bad for the governor. Look at what Governor Cuomo went through. He actually enjoyed when the Republicans were in the majority in the state Senate better than when they were in the minority.
Well, it sounds like because he could have said, I want to do this and here's my bill, and you guys could vote on yours, which would be more down to earth, and that would be the real one that went through, right?
Well, and you need balance.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to govern for the whole state with policy that makes sense for everyone, you really need to have some balanced voices at the table. And right now, it's kind of there's this like, how far to the left can we leap? And there's this competition between the Senate and the Assembly, and they're dragging Kathy Hochul along with them to say, how progressive can we possibly be? Can we be the most progressive in the country? Can we be the most progressive in the world? Can we, It's not a healthy conversation or a healthy competition for New Yorkers by any means.
No, I mean, you just look at the gas stoves issue, the farm
huge,
labor
for
hours.
sure.
I mean, there's a whole number
Electric
of things.
cars,
Yeah.
I mean, the cost of them. And, when you listen to everyday people, it's huge. So I'm going to have to take my gas stove that I love cooking and throw it out. And what about, who has $50,000, $70,000 to spend on a new electric vehicle? And they're looking at, I just bought a vehicle. I like what I have, and now I'm going to be forced to upgrade. So those are the conversations that happen. And then with executive orders too, moving things through, it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of back and forth negotiation going on. And hopefully that will change.
You didn't take 45 minutes, so you can keep going.
Well, I only answered the one.
I know. Go to the next.
What was the next?
The transition, and something that you had asked about. Was
Earlier, going from assembly to state senate.
Yeah,
But it feels different.
and whether it was just about building relationships and that kind of thing. Something that really surprised me, because I had been a staffer for a state senator, so I kind of saw politics from the inside, right? And ran for the Watertown City Council because I really wanted to help my community where I planted roots and saw some things that I thought really like, hey, I can just be helpful here with a real servant's heart. I went into the Watertown City Council, and I did a good enough job that people kind of took notice, and they're like, hey, you should run for higher office. And I kind of always saw myself as kind of like, I'm a behind the scenes kind of worker. I'd rather not be in front of a microphone. So even when and this might surprise people, but even when I was seated in the New York State Assembly, I'm like, oh, okay, I want a seat and beat a 10-year incumbent. I kind of was still like, I'm going to sit down and listen for a while. There's 100, and if you've ever seen the New York State Assembly chamber, it's pretty intimidating as a room. There's 150 chairs in it. There's some members that have been seated doing this for 40 years, and like, what did I know? But what I realized pretty quickly was that there's a real need for people to stand up, especially in upstate New York, to have a good debate and to stand up for the people that they represent. So I might have been nervous the few first times that I got into debate or made some good points on bills. But with practice, I got better at it, and now I'm bringing that to the New York State Senate. So
That's great.
I think, you don't always pick what committees you're going to be ranker on, and you don't always pick as a freshman what committees you're even going to sit on, but you make your suggestions, and then they've got to dole out the work. And Leader Ort, who's the Republican leader in the state Senate, selected me to be the ranking member on the Elections Committee. And the very first thing that the Democrats did to start our session off in the first week was call an emergency meeting of the Elections Committee off of the Senate floor and pushed 12 bills directly onto the Senate floor. And now here I am, the ranker. This is my first week. I'm thinking, I've got to make some friends, build some relationships. I'm going to be reaching across the aisle. In elections, it's the most contentious of all of the policy areas that we possibly could have. And I was lead on debate for those bills. So sometimes it's just, you just have to rise to the occasion, and you have to do the work.
Yeah.
And
how did that go? I want to hear the end result.
I fought like heck, but all the bills passed.
Yeah, that's that super majority thing.
That's the someone was mentioning. I think it was Brian Miller was mentioning at this morning's economic forum that in the state assembly they've mostly just focused on chapter amendments. And what those are is after the governor has signed a bill into law, she signs it, doesn't veto it, pretty much for political reasons. So she's saying, this is very poorly written, but I'll look bad if I veto this bill. So what I'm going to do with the agreement of the Senate and the Assembly leadership is if they agree in the first weeks of session to pass this chapter amendment, an amendment to the bill, the law that I'm chaptering into statute, right? Then I will sign this bill. I won't veto it. And everybody looks good. So they're doing all of these technical changes, which really just are a result of lazy legislators and bad policy.
But Brian was intimating that the chapters typically came from the Republican Party and that they were, quote, good things. Is that the case?
So Brian Miller's 100% spot on. And it's validating, and this is the reason I brought this up, so thanks for circling back, because it's like, what did you do in debate? Well, I made some good points, and then they passed the bill anyways. But those points are heard by the executive when we make it. They're paid attention to by the courts when they make decisions on these things and what the intent of the legislature was. And it's so validating when the governor doesn't veto, she creates a chapter amendment to change it for exactly some of the points that we brought up in debate. And there's been a lot of bills that I've voted against making these points saying, hey, look, if you had paid attention or ever asked for our input before you put this on the floor and you changed this, this, and this, then I'd probably support this bill. But you made it untenable today. And then the governor introduces a chapter amendment in the next legislature that does exactly those things, and I'll support the chapter amendment sometimes, even if I was against the original bill.
So the farm bill that is going to reduce the hours from 60 to 40, is there the hope that there could be a chapter amendment that could come along that could slow that process down? Explain it first for people who don't know, who are listening, but then kind of
what the bill is.
Yeah, so what they did originally in the farm labor bill was to create a wage board. the legislature, and when you talked about electrification, this is another example. Instead of doing their job as the legislature in creating the policy and directing the executive to put that forward, instead they push it off to a committee or a board that they create and they appoint to enact regulations and then enact the thing. So in this case, in the farm labor bill, they created a farm wage board that would, in the future, make decisions about what the overtime thresholds and pay and all of those kind of things for agriculture workers looks like. And we're seeing now down the pike, years later, we're seeing the result of that. And that threshold, that overtime threshold, is going to be lowered to 40 hours a week. The agriculture community is rightly very concerned about it. The farmers that I run into on a day-to-day basis have worked around a lot of government regulation and changes. I'm confident that they're going to be able to figure it out, but you're just making it that much more difficult. Mm-hmm. When I'm talking to farmers that have to either game the system with sharing labor, harvest time happens. And harvest time does not happen on a 9-to-5 basis. You can't just expect hey, it's going to rain next week, but
hey, your 8 hours are up. Sorry, we don't have the budget for overtime.
I'm at the overtime threshold, so let the crop sit. That's not the type of industry that it works. Yeah. And what was really disappointing policy-wise is that the legislature was derelict in their duty because they didn't fully think out this policy, and it's our job to do that. They put it off on a commission, and then everyone just let this happen. The governor let it happen. And it didn't take into account the industry that is so impacted by it in the first place. And that's agriculture really needed to be the driver of that. I haven't had a farmer that says, oh, boy, you know what? I really just wish I could pay my labor less and make them work more. They want to take care of their employees. Their employees take care of them. Yeah. They want to take care of their livestock. They want to take care of their land because that's what puts food on their table. And if you know farmers and have that conversation with them, you get it. But if you are a New York City legislator that is just trying to do a thing to score political points in New York City, then you avail yourself of the opportunity to completely ignore the voice of farmers, and this is what you end up with.
They would have been better advised to go talk to some farmers. And see what hours they're working. They're, up at 4:00 and they go until, 9, and they're not making bukus of money. Their margins are very, very limited. So, it's unfortunate.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And you bring up a great point when you talk about the actual farmers and the family farms families. And how much families pour. It's 20. You talk about a dairy farmer, it's a 24/7 operation.
It is.
There's no quit for them. They laugh at 60 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true.
Let's break for a commercial then.
Okay. Visit My Little Falls and stay connected with the latest news, information, and events in the city and the area. Our mission is to generate interest in the community and connect residents in a more meaningful way by facilitating deeper conversations about how these stories will shape the future of the Mohawk Valley. Join thousands of weekly visitors who stay up to date with feature stories, interviews, videos, our event calendar, and print publication, the Mohawk Valley Express. It's about timely local news for the community, keeping citizens informed about important issues, telling about the people who live and work here, and giving locally owned businesses the opportunity to reach a very targeted audience of locals and tourists alike. It's a whole new form of media-rich content developed specifically for today's mobile lifestyle and listeners. You can download our iOS app in the iTunes Store, listen to our country music streaming radio station, or sign up for a weekly newsletter. Stop by today at mylittlefalls.com. You'll be glad you did. Okay, Mike, we're back.
I love the theme music at the end.
Do you like that? I've got one guy that just jazzes him. He does a sports hockey show, and he goes nuts over that thing.
That is intense.
He goes, "You didn't watch the visuals.
Movie trailer-esque."
It is.
Yeah,
we can crank some stuff out, man.
I love it.
Okay, so let's talk about money.
Okay,
because that's really at the heart of everything. The budget has changed dramatically. almost doubling.
State budget, yeah.
Yes. Talk about that. Give us a little background on that.
Yeah, so like $227 billion of other people's money is our plan to spend. And it's not even other people's money. We think about taxes as, Albany thinks about taxes as revenue, but most of the budget at this point, and the comptroller has put some things out recently, is borrowing. We're borrowing on the backs of our children and on the backs of our future in New York State at a dangerous rate and an unsustainable rate.
Wow.
You can make an argument for borrowing a little bit. Certainly, municipal bonds can be taken advantage of to move forward on big projects. But when the debt is bigger and bigger, and you're just pushing that out towards the next generation, it's a really dangerous precedent that the governor and the legislature are setting here.
And from the state to the counties, how is that going to affect the counties?
So the one of the things that is a big concern for the counties right now is the state. Last year it was, or maybe the year before, Governor Cuomo put what they called the sales tax intercept. He was going to take some sales tax and did from counties. And, that's something that they depend on for their revenue source. And counties provide essential services and really are in large part a pass-through for a lot of mandated programs from the state in the first place. So it's not really fair to shortchange them when it's your programs that they're implementing anyways. Governor Hochul in her budget this year is trying to intercept federal Medicaid dollars. It's probably not even legal to do so.
That's a crazy burden on the county.
It's a strange, in a year where it seems like she's, spend more and borrow everything anyways. It's really strange to say, but I need to intercept this Medicaid money that's going through the state to the counties and comes from the federal government.
Well, all the county administrators came out against it unanimously.
Of course.
I mean, there's not one county that says this is a good idea.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So we're hopeful, and this is the period in the budget where we're still going through budget hearings. So the governor presents her. This is just the battle rhythm. I'll give you the boring bureaucracy of it for a second. Look at your watch.
No, I wasn't. It's an Apple Watch. I was not looking at the time. I was looking at the news that came up.
Oh, I see.
See, no time.
It's tough. It's tough this day and age to know. Oh, okay. All right, I'm on the clock.
Today, these days, if anybody goes like that, they're not necessarily checking their time. Good Lord.
Just seeing the text messages come in or the recent headlines.
We're not live, and so people aren't going, can you get Mark moving along?
Maybe it's just the reaction from a politician. Yeah. He's so used to people doing that, so you got to go.
Well, he's used to his young assistant keeping him on the clock.
That's
what it is. So, yeah, I'm sorry I did that.
Lost his train of thought.
You're fine. So the governor presents her state budget. She does the state of the state that usually outlines some of the policy for the year. Then she presents the state budget. And then the legislature, the Senate, and the Assembly get together and set up joint budget hearings. So we hear from all of the department heads and a lot of the advocacy groups on different subject areas. So there could be an economic development and tourism budget hearing that will go a full day long, hearing from, Empire State Development and the Council on the Arts, and then all of the advocacy groups underneath, right, that will talk about the things that they liked in the governor's budget and the things that they didn't like. And those are for the Senate and the Assembly to ask questions to and then ruminate on. And eventually the Senate and the Assembly, after they've heard all of this, they create their own one-house budgets. So right now, it's our job to listen, ask good questions, and advocate for things for our districts. So in my case, for the 49th Senate District, to make sure that the things that matter here are, brought to the forefront in the state budget process. Then when the state Senate will present its one-house budget, the state Assembly presents its one-house budget, and that means you see, and it sounds funny to have three different budgets out there, but you see where there's agreement and disagreement between the two houses of the legislature and between the governor's office. And then finally is the worst part of all of this, and that's when it was traditionally three men in a room. Now it's two ladies and a man in a room. The majority leader of the Senate, the Speaker of the Assembly, and the governor go into a room, and New Yorkers get what comes out of that room. They negotiate the final differences in the budget.
Wow.
That's crazy.
So there's no stopgap, or no one's highly motivated to rein in expenses right now, it seems.
That's where I would say the greatest ally in state government right now is the New York State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli. He has published some things that should give state leaders pause before they continue to recklessly spend and borrow. I applaud him. He's not the same party as me, but I applaud him for having the political courage to call it out.
Well, somebody has to.
Yeah. And there isn't that political check and balance right now in Albany. So I appreciate him bringing that accountability to the table.
Well, at least it opens the conversation, because without it, it just seems like, it's freewheeling, and it can continue forever. And if we're borrowing against, the future, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's like government. That's what even the federal government. That's what they're doing. There's no difference.
Yeah. Well, and at some point, I asked. I think it was. I might have asked this to Hope Knight, who is the head of Empire State Development in Albany, in one of the budget hearings. I asked, what is the right percentage? And here's housing has been a big issue and crux, and there was a lack of building for a while. The governor in her budget this year proposed mandating essentially 800,000 new housing units be built in the state of New York, to the point where in a city like Little Falls, she could actually roll over your local zoning laws if she doesn't like how much housing you've built here. It was a really not a very kind local control kind of, but we've been talking about housing a lot. The governor also said in her State of the State, nobody should be spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And she said nobody should be spending more than 6% of their income on fuel or electricity, on energy, right? So I asked the question to ESD, how much should we be spending out of our income on government? And so far, nobody's been able.
Crickets.
Yeah, nobody's been able to provide me an answer, and we'll ask for a formal answer in writing as well, because she said, well, we'll have to get back to you. I mean, frankly, if you're the head of economic development for the state of New York, you really need to think about the size of government and what that should look like when you're developing an economy. I mean, these are big. I know this is like big philosophical stuff, but it's like
it's important to be thinking through these things, when you look at a choice with what you do with your money as a taxpayer.
Yeah.
The more that the state takes or the government takes, the less you have. And then if you shouldn't be spending more than 30%. What if you're just a nut about houses and you want to spend 80% and live on ramen? I mean, is you're right to do so?
No, I see ramen in the future.
Well, we all have friends who make a decision to be a little bit house poor, and that's fine. Who am I in the government to tell them how house poor they should be? Well,
certainly not the government, right? Their family and their friends should be the ones saying you're crazy. What are you doing to yourself? But
I have one question on that housing. So if we're bleeding population as a state, why do we need that mandate of 800,000 units?
It's a rhetorical question. Why? Don't ask me to defend that.
It just seems counterintuitive.
Where are these numbers coming from? Yeah.
What, the need for 800,000 units?
For 800,000.
I don't know.
You make a great point. I don't know where 800,000 came from. Some in and this doesn't affect us as much up here. Some in Long Island are very concerned that because housing development has struggled in New York City because of all of the issues that New York City has created in its own housing, that now New York City members are looking at the opportunity and, frankly, the political opportunity to build housing complexes on Long Island and essentially just extend New York City further out onto the island.
Okay,
So
but that's them. Why don't they leave us alone? Why do they have to mandate
that's
to
all,
us? Come on.
That is always the Albany question.
Okay.
And that's where it really comes to those conversations of, hey, if you want to. I think it's like here's my governmental philosophy. I think there's a lot of members that people that run for office and don't understand what layer of government they belong in on any particular day. Mm-hmm. There's folks who run for the New York State Legislature that disagree with the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. Look, I like the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. That's fine. If they want to change the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, there's a method for doing that, and they should run for Congress in New York City to do that. So why put a bill out on our desks in the New York State Legislature that is in violation of the Constitution that they swore to uphold on the first day that they got on this job?
It's almost like payback. Like, well, the Supreme Court rules this, and we'll show them.
Well, sure, and we could talk.
Yeah.
I could talk about Second Amendment in the saga that we're in there. Actually, I'm a party to a lawsuit right now to sue the state of New York for violating people's Second Amendment, First Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights. But I think it also goes a layer down. There's a lot of state legislators who would be better served if they ran for the New York City Council than if they ran for the state legislature, because it's our job in the state legislature to put policy forward that makes sense for every New Yorker. So that means, those folks out on Long Island. It means in upstate New York, western New York, North Country, Adirondack, Southern Tier, Mohawk Valley, absolutely. And they bring policy that is very popular in their neighborhood in New York City, but it doesn't make any sense for the rest of the state. And I think understanding what layer of government you belong in, and I know it sounds boring and bureaucratic to be like that. I don't begrudge them for being an advocate. If they want to change the Second Amendment, good. Call your congressperson or run for Congress. Or if you want to change New York City housing, fine. Call your city council member or Mayor Adams or run for city council. But you don't need to bring that to the halls of Albany. This is where we handle statewide policy. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, and that's why New York City ends up being the tail that wags the dog here, and why we're continually frustrated as upstate New Yorkers with what comes out of Albany.
Absolutely.
Well, they say that the trend's coming up that more people will be moving to the cities, the larger cities, as time goes on. But I don't know. Upstate New York, these people really appreciate the extra elbow room and with land and ranches.
We love a little
and
city like Little Falls.
Exactly, charming, and a lot of downstate people come up here and they love to wander about because it's so different, the lifestyle and walking everywhere than they're used to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of positive with that. I think that goes back to my point about not having a voice. I feel like, everything is dictated based on downstate, and upstate, it doesn't relate. And, it's challenging, like you said.
Well, I think, there's always going to be the competing interests of New York City as a population center and the rest of the state. There have been. But right now we're in like a second Tammany Hall period, and it needs to break. I think the pendulum has swung way too far, and I think whether it's by politics or whatever means, it's going to swing back. It has to, and it's my job to bring the fight and some common sense in Albany each time I go.
It sounds great.
Awesome.
We're ready for it.
We're ready here to. Mark, you got any last words to close it out here?
Oh, we're already
Anything good?
done?
Well, you could go more. I mean, we could get into one of those 45-minute speeches. I know you're used to doing that on the floor. So
we could do a part 1 and a part 2.
Yeah, we could. I know Michelle would love to have you back. She probably had
would.
some different questions, but.
Well, and I am sad that I missed Michelle today, but it was a pleasure having a cup of coffee with you guys and enjoying some conversation.
Well, it was our pleasure indeed, and it's so happy to have you here visiting with us and sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, if people want to reach out to me anytime, they can find me or my very, very helpful, dedicated public servant staff.
Your 15-year-old assistant. Yeah.
He's 20. That's not fair.
That's not fair.
And he's my legislative director.
He's in the
doing a
back. Part
great
of his
job.
body's there somewhere.
315-782-3418. That's 315-782-3418. I'm Senator Mark Walczyk. It's an honor to represent you in the New York State Senate. And feel free to call with your questions or issues or problems with New York State. It's my job to make sure, we talked about some of the policy stuff, but it's my job to make sure that you get your fair shake from New York State government.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
My pleasure to be here today. And Michelle, I hope you're feeling better.
Yeah. And if you need any information on the chamber, you can go to herkimercountychamber.com or call them at 315-866-7820.
Have a great day.